Hey guys, it's Katie Beck again. This is my Week 8 oral explanation on the development of intelligence testing. We know from the chapter and lecture that the concept of intelligence testing was around before the Stanford-Binet and that its roots go back even further than the Binet-Simon scale of intelligence. Intelligence testing really began with Francis Galton. He was immensely focused on intelligence and individual differences, and these interests led him to study intelligence and its inheritability. When James McKean Cattell, who was interested in Galton's work, published a paper, it was the first time to use the term mental test. He proposed 60 different mental tests, and the majority of them were Galtonian, with some inspiration from Wundt. Cattell's tests were later found to be inaccurate and fell into disuse, but the idea of mental testing remained. In France, Alfred Binet and his assistant, Victor Henry, began to assess intelligence by directly measuring mental operations, rather than sensory acuity like Galton and Cattell did. The two thought that Galton and Cattell focused too much on sensations rather than higher mental processes. While this research would prove useful in Binet's future studies, the Binet-Henry tests were also found to be inaccurate, and the two ceased their research. So enter Theodore Simon. Binet was Theodore Simon's mentor, and together they developed the Binet-Simon scale of intelligence in 1905 in response to the need of the French government to identify children with mental deficiencies in schools. The scale had 30 tests, and Binet and Simon found which ones could be completed by average children in specific age groups. Those children who could not complete what average children in their age group could were found to be subnormal. The test incorporated several abilities to constitute intelligence and was the first of its kind. Binet and Simon revised their test in 1908 and 1911 to distinguish between different intelligence levels beyond normal and subnormal, and to add more age groups. It was further revised by other psychologists in later years, and we'll talk about some of them. Before we move to intelligence testing in the United States, I want to quickly mention IQ, which would become an important component of reporting someone's intelligence. So based on a child's performance on the Binet-Simon scale, William Stern introduced the term mental age, which led to the calculation of IQ, or the intelligence quotient, which can be calculated based on the formula on page 298 of the textbook. Like I said, IQ became an important way to quantify intelligence rather than just having categories or level like the Binet-Simon scale initially did. So this finally leads to the section in the textbook on intelligence testing in the U.S. Henry Herbert Goddard translated the Binet-Stanley scale into English and used the test to classify children based on retardation, and was a huge supporter of the test after Binet's death. He administered the test to students in his school and in many other schools throughout New Jersey. Goddard also assessed immigrants on Ellis Island to test for mental defectiveness. Although we are now sure that the test was not accurate due to cultural barriers, thousands of immigrants were deported because of his findings, and these findings were later used to support the restriction of immigration by the U.S. government. Lewis Madison Terman also attempted to create tests for intelligence in students, not knowing that this had already been done by Binet and Simon. He further translated the Binet-Simon scale and changed it to have an average score of 100 in American children. The version he published with his graduate student was released in 1912, and the version he revised himself even further came out in 1916, and it became known as the Stanford-Binet. It was further revised in 1937 and 1960. I have a few more things on intelligence testing that I quickly want to note, even though they weren't in the lecture. So Robert Yerkes proposed that people be given a score on the Binet-Simon scale, based on how many questions they got right rather than calculating IQ, therefore removing age from the equation. He was also part of a group that developed tests for the Army and Navy soldiers during World War I to identify deficiencies and those who should be selected for special training or officership. Even to this day, there is no single definition of intelligence and no one way to measure it. There is still a dispute as to whether intelligence is one factor or a combination of many factors. David Wechsler did create some tests that eliminated the issue of age and made it possible to assess adults. The Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, or the WAIS, and the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children, the WISC. Even though there's still controversy over intelligence testing and more research is needed, the WAIS, WISC, and Stanford-Binet are still the most widely used tests today.